The wind moves gently across an ancient valley. The sound of distant trumpets echoes as if time itself is whispering a warning. Shadows stretch across the earth like fingers searching for something lost. In the silence, a voice asks, "Have you ever heard a story that wasn't just a story?" Beneath the surface of a familiar parable lies something unsettling, buried for centuries. Waiting, this parable was told not to comfort, but to awaken. Its words are soft, but its meaning pierces the soul. It is not for the lukewarm or the distracted. It calls the heart to tremble, not just to listen. And like many of Jesus' teachings, it divides. We've all heard the parable of the sheep and the goats. A simple image, almost poetic. Sheep on the right, goats on the left. But have you ever wondered why that animal? Why that division? And most importantly, when exactly was this parable meant to unfold? It's not merely a metaphor for kindness. It's not just a lesson about good deeds. This parable hidden at the end of Matthew 25 holds a pattern. One that connects ancient prophecies, the final judgment, and even the times we're living in now. But few ever trace its shadow to the end. Tonight, we begin not with answers, but with questions. Questions that sting. Questions that stay. What if we've misunderstood the timing of the judgment? What if this story was not about the past, but a map for the final days? Would we still dare to ignore it? Asterisk, judgment. A word that makes the soul shift in its seat. For some, it evokes justice. For others, fear. But what if judgment is not a moment, but a process? Not a thunderbolt from heaven, but a slow unveiling of hearts. The parable doesn't begin with wrath, it begins with separation. He will separate them one from another. Matthew 25-32, not punish, not condemn, separate. This act echoes Genesis, when light was divided from darkness. It is a sorting, ... Quiet, precise, absolute, and yet the world doesn't notice. It never does when eternity begins to move. The sheep and the goats stood in the same field, ate the same grass, walked side by side for years. But when the king appears, everything changes. Their true nature is exposed not by appearances, but by what they did or didn't do. Could this be a mirror of our generation? In ancient Jewish culture, goats were often sacrificed. Sheep, on the other hand, were symbols of covenant, community, and following. The division in the parable is not Krulitz revealing. It shows what was always there, but hidden by time, comfort, or noise. Which one have we become? And if the separation has already begun, would we recognize it? Or are we still waiting for trumpets and fire while heaven silently draws its line? The first step in judgment is not fire, it's clarity. And clarity can be terrifying. Asterisk, in the parable, the Son of Man comes in glory and sits on his throne. But what if he never left it? What if the throne was never empty, only hidden from sight? We wait for a visible king, forgetting that his reign began long ago. Invisible, but unstoppable, the courtroom of heaven never closed. The throne is not just a seat, it's a symbol of absolute authority. In ancient cultures, to sit on the throne meant judgment had begun. There was no turning back, no more warnings. The king in the parable isn't arriving to decide, ... He's arriving to reveal. The verdict was already written in action. Nations will be gathered before him. Matthew 25-32, this is not just about individuals. It's about systems, empires, ideologies. Every kingdom of men will be weighed. The separation isn't just personal, it's cosmic. A global sorting has already begun, though the world still sleeps. This throne is not a metaphor, it is the fulfillment of Daniel's vision. The Ancient of Days, the fiery wheels, the river of judgment. Daniel 7-9-10, Jesus ties his parable to apocalyptic prophecy, bridging past and future. The sheep and goats are not random figures, they are echoes of eternity. So ask yourself, who sits on the throne of your decisions? Your time, your silence, because one day every hidden throne will collapse before the one that never moved. And when he speaks, no mask will remain. Asterisk, there is a silence in the parable that most overlook. The silence of mercy. Withdrawn. For so long, grace was the air we breathed. Second chances, forgiveness, time to change. But in this moment, when the Son of Man sits, the door quietly closes. Not with a slam, but with finality. The virgins once begged for oil. The wicked servant once hid the talent, and now the goats beg for mercy. But the king does not weep, he does not plead, he simply speaks. Depart from me. No parable strikes with such cold clarity, because this is the moment when mercy becomes memory. How terrifying to stand before the king and realize he knows your face but not your heart. The goats did not kill, steal, or blaspheme. They simply didn't act. They passed by the hungry. They ignored the stranger. And now, their silence is their sentence. It is not evil that condemns them, it is indifference. They believed they were safe. They believed being near the flock was enough. But eternity doesn't weigh your beliefs, ... It weighs your fruit. Their judgment is not unfair. It is precise. They are given exactly what they chose. And one day, we may hear it too. The sound of footsteps walking away from light. Not because the king has no love, but because mercy, once rejected, becomes justice. And justice never forgets. Asterisk, when the king speaks in the parable, his voice is calm, but his eyes see everything. Not just actions, but motives. Not just deeds, but hearts. Before this throne, nothing is hidden. The judge doesn't ask questions. He declares, because he already knows. He always has ... to the sheep. He says, I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. But they don't remember doing it. That's the mystery. They weren't performing goodness. They were living it. Their compassion wasn't rehearsed. It was real, invisible in the moment, but now eternal. The goats, too, are confused. They never saw Jesus in need. They never saw him hungry, naked, or imprisoned. But that's the point. He was therein, the unnoticed, the unimportant, the inconvenient. He was in the margins, ... And they didn't look. Or worse, they looked away. These are not strangers to religion. They likely believed, sang, gave offerings, but they missed the face of God in the broken. And now, as they stand before the judge, they see that face again, this time in glory. And it's too late to bow in love. Only judgment remains. His eyes do not accuse, they reveal. His gaze is not cruel, it is final. The same eyes that once wept over Jerusalem now pierce the nations, and as they search the soul, there is no place left to hide, not even behind religion. Asterisk, in the rush to interpret this parable, one detail is often ignored, a line so subtle, yet so revealing. All the nations will be gathered before him, not just believers, not just the church, everyone, kings and peasants, skeptics and saints. No one is missing from the assembly. We often imagine judgment as distant, maybe symbolic, but this gathering is real. It echoes the great convocation in Joel 3, where nations are summoned to the valley of decision. And once they arrive, there is no escape. Geography cannot protect. Titles mean nothing. Silence is impossible. This is not an altar call, it is a verdict. And the parable makes no mention of defense, no trial, no jury. The judge speaks, and destinies are sealed. It's not about what we planned to do, what we meant to say, or what we believed in theory. It's about what we lived. That's the terrifying mercy of this moment. It is just. It weighs only what's true, not feelings, not reputation. The goats didn't expect this. They lived assuming the separation was about doctrine or rituals, but the king was watching. Not what they knew, but what they did when no one else saw. And now, that forgotten detail rises like thunder. All the nations. This is not a personal parable, it's global. And maybe, just maybe, it's already unfolding. Asterisk, there is a silence that covers this parable like a veil, the kind that settles just before revelation. The sheep do not boast, the goats do not argue, the king does not explain himself. This is not the silence of peace, ... It is the silence of eternity speaking without words. Hidden in that stillness is a kingdom. One not built with swords or votes, but with sacrifice. The sheep never sought thrones. They served in shadows. Their greatness was never public. But now the king calls them blessed of my Father and invites them into a kingdom prepared before the foundation of the world. That phrase, before the foundation of the world, shakes the soul. It means their reward was never random. Their place was not earned, it was foreseen. This judgment does not surprise God. It completes a story he began long before creation ever breathed. The goats, too, were known, not as villains, but as those who refused the invitation to love. They had their own kingdoms of comfort, image, control. But now, those kingdoms crumble in silence, and the only words they hear are departure. The kingdom, in this parable, is not distant, it is already near. Hidden in how we treat the unseen, how we give without applause, how we choose mercy over convenience. It is born in silence and revealed in fire. The parable ends in fire, but it begins in a garden. Not the one Jesus walked in before his crucifixion, but the first, Eden. There too was a separation, light from darkness, man from immortality, the sword that turned in every direction. What was once home became exile. Depart from me. Those same words echo through time, all the way back to Genesis. Adam and Eve were not struck down. They were sent away from the presence, from the tree, from the glory. And now, the goats hear the same sentence. Not because of a bite of fruit, but because of what they withheld. There's a pattern here, a divine rhythm. Rebellion doesn't always roar, it often whispers through neglect. Adam hid, Cain ignored. The people before the flood laughed. And every time, judgment came like a shadow. Slow, then sudden. Eden's gate closed, the ark door sealed, Sodom burned. Jesus, in this parable, is not inventing a new story. He is completing the oldest one. The return to Eden is possible, but only for those who lived as if the garden still mattered, who fed, clothed, visited, loved, not to earn paradise, but to mirror it. The fire at the end of the parable is not a surprise. Ending, it's a return to beginning. Judgment is not God's. Anger unleashed, it is Eden's gate. Closing again, fire in Scripture is never just destruction, it is memory. It burns, yes, but it also purifies, illuminates, and recalls what was lost. The fire at the end of the parable is not random wrath. It is the flame that remembers every forgotten act, every ignored cry. From the burning bush that called Moses to the tongues of fire at Pentecost, fire reveals God's presence. Yet here, it also reveals absence, the cold spaces where mercy once dwelled but was rejected. The goats feel this fire not as punishment, but as exposure. This fire consumes. The kingdoms built on selfishness, pride, and neglect. It shines light on the shadowed corners of the soul where compassion was absent. The flames do not discriminate, they only unveil. And in that unveiling, the final separation is made clear. Yet for the sheep, the fire is different warmth, illumination, the glory of the coming kingdom. The same fire that judges the goats becomes a crown of light for the faithful. The paradox of judgment, fire both destroys and glorifies. So the fire is not just an end, it is a witness. It remembers what we chose to see and what we chose to ignore. And in its flames, the final truth burns brightest. The judgment was not about us, but about the kingdom we built with our lives. In the parable, the world is gathered, yet no one speaks except the king. This silence is not emptiness, is the weight of truth pressing down on every soul. Every whispered excuse, every hidden mercy, every choice laid bare, the silent witness is time itself. The moments when we turned away, when we passed by without, noticing time that never forgets, never pauses. It watches as kingdoms rise and fall, as hearts harden or soften. It stands alongside the judge, recording every act. This silence is also the voice of conscience, long ignored but never silenced. The gentle whisper that grows louder until it becomes undeniable. At the final gathering, conscience speaks louder than words condemning or comforting, depending on what we allowed it to shape. History, too, is a silent witness. The nations assembled are not just bodies, they are stories. Stories of mercy refused, of promises broken, of love ignored. The silence between their hearts is the loudest cry of Ola, cry for justice and remembrance. And in this silence, we confront ourselves. What have we done with the chances given? What have we ignored in the moments we had? The silent witness demands an answer, and in that answer lies eternity. Long before the judgment, there was an invitation, an open door. The king's call echoed through history, prophets and parables alike. Yet many lived as if the invitation was meant for someone else, someone distant. Someone other, the goats, lived in kingdoms of comfort, never realizing their rejection was also a refusal. A refusal to see the hungry, to visit the imprisoned, to clothe the naked. These were not optional acts, they were the language of the kingdom. The invitation was simple: love. But what happens when invitations are ignored? When the knocks go unanswered, doors close silently, unnoticed. The parable's greatest tragedy is not wrath, it is absence. The absence of love where it was most needed. The absence of response to a divine call. This lost invitation echoes through every generation. It whispers in the silent corners of our lives, asking, did we miss the chance? Did we overlook the face of God disguised as need? The answer is terrifying and hopeful, because there is still time, yet that time is finite. The parable warns, the door will not stay open forever. The invitation is not eternal, and when it closes, mercy becomes memory. Asterisk, every choice we make carries weight beyond the moment. Parable shows us this with brutal clarity. The sheep and the goats stand as symbols, not only of who we are, but of the consequences we inherit. Choices are stones laid on the path to eternity. The goat's failure was not a grand sin, but a pattern of neglect. Each ignored act of mercy, every silence in the face of suffering, accumulated into a verdict. Choices we think small or private ripple through the fabric of time. Shaping our eternal destiny, the sheep, by contrast, lived in attentive love. Their kindness was a testimony, a quiet rebellion against a world obsessed with self. Their choices spoke louder than words, echoing in heaven's halls. The weight they carried was light because it was grounded in grace. But the question remains, do we feel the weight of our daily decisions? Or do we walk blind, trusting time and mercy to cover the cracks? The parable shatters illusions, revealing that nothing is overlooked. Every moment counts. Every act matters. In the end, the scales of judgment are not balanced by belief alone, but by the lives we choose to live. The weight of choices is the weight of eternity. Asterisk, as the parable draws to its terrifying close, the king's voice calls out one last time. It is a call not to the goats, but to ustos who watch from the sidelines, those who hesitate between belief and action. The final call is both invitation and warning. The sheep enter eternal life. The goats depart into eternal punishment. But what is eternal punishment? Is it a place of fire alone, or the unbearable absence of mercy? The parable leaves us with a silence that screams. It is a question no one wants to answer, yet cannot avoid. This call demands response not tomorrow, but now. The time for ignoring the hungry, the stranger, the prisoner is ending. The king's voice pierces through history's noise, summoning hearts awake. Will we listen, or will we turn away as the goats did? In this final moment, the choice is ours. The story is unfinished until we write our part. The parable is a mirror, held up to eternity, reflecting the path ahead. And the question lingers, which side will we stand on when the king arrives? The final call is silent in the world, but loud in the soul. It is the heartbeat of judgment and mercy. Last chance before the door closes forever. Asterisk, the parable ends, but its shadow lingers, long, deep, and unavoidable. Eternity stretches beyond our sight, yet it casts a shadow that touches every moment. This shadow is judgment, not distant, but near, pressing on the edges of our lives. We live under this shadow, whether we see it or not. It follows our footsteps, watches our choices, and waits patiently for the hour of revelation. The shadow does not discriminate. It falls on kings and beggars alike, whispering the same question, who have you become? In this shadow, the final separation is not just about deeds, but identity. Sheep and goats are not merely characters, they are destinies shaped by the echoes of mercy or indifference. The parable reveals the truth many avoid. Judgment begins, here now, in how we live. And as the shadow deepens, silence falls once more. No trumpet sounds, no angel calls, only the stillness of eternity meeting time. The question remains suspended in the air. Will we stand in the light or fade into the dark? The parable ends in silence, inviting us to listen, reflect, and choose. For in the shadow of eternity, every soul must answer.